Assalamualaikum. Hi guys. So today we focus on first topic of STA108, Introduction to Statistics. So at the end of this topic, you will be able to know the basic terms and concepts of statistics. Second, you will be able to identify the best sampling technique to be used. And third one is you can identify the best data collection method to be used in the study. So what is the statistics? Statistics is a science of collecting, simplifying, and describing data as well as making inference, means drawing conclusion based on the analysis of data. So you must remember, first collect the data. Second, after collect the data, simplify the data. Next step, describe the data. So after describe the data, at the end, for sure, we have or we need to draw a conclusion. So normally statistics widely used in many areas. For example, sciences, information technology, business, agriculture, and also education. So there are two types of statistics. First one is descriptive statistics. You must remember the word describe. So how we want to describe the data. So descriptive statistics means that a study that deals with a set of procedures of collecting, summarizing, and presenting data in a convenient and informative way. So normally we will use graphical technique, means we construct charts, graphs, and also tables to represent the data. And also under descriptive statistics, we can calculate. For example, we calculate average, percentage to summarize the data. So that one, descriptive statistics. The other one, types of statistics is inferential statistics. So this one based on a study that deals with making a decision or arriving at a conclusion about the population of interest based on the sample. So this one, inferential statistics, means that we as a researcher draw a conclusion based on sample to represent population. So next, basic statistical terms. So this is the list of the term that you have to know under statistics. So first is element. So element means that an object on which measurement is taken. So element known as experimental unit. So second is population. So population means that all elements of a defined group under consideration in a study. So third term is sample. So sample means that a subset selected from a population. Census. So what is the census? A study conducted on every item in the population of interest. Meanwhile, sample survey is a study that involves a subgroup or sample of a population. Next term is variable. So variable, any characteristics that can be measured from an element. Data, any information or measurement based on element. Okay, next, parameter and statistics. So parameter means that a summary measures for the entire population. Meanwhile, statistics, a summary measures for a sample. So this is a basic statistical terms that we have to know when we are learning statistics. Okay, so before we proceed to types of variable, recall back what is the variable. So variable, any characteristics that can be measured from an element. So you must remember the exactly meaning of the variable. Next, focus on types of variable. First, qualitative variable. Second is quantitative variable. So quantitative variable means data in numerical form. Numerical form means in number. For example, age, weight, height, temperature. Meanwhile, qualitative variable data in non-numerical form. For example, gender, race, education level. So that one is the main difference between qualitative and quantitative variable. Remember that qualitative non-numerical form, quantitative in numerical form. Okay, so under quantitative variable, we have discrete quantitative variable, which can be measured precisely. So here, measured precisely, normally by counting. For example, number of flower, number of pen, number of students, number of car, number. So that one is discrete quantitative variable. So the other one is continuous quantitative variable. So this one, we will use measuring device. Here, measuring device. For example, height, temperature, and time. For sure, when we want to obtain the data for height, temperature, and time, we will use measuring device. So that one is continuous quantitative variable. Now, we proceed to scales of measurement, known as type of scale. So we have four types of scale: nominal, ordinal, interval, and then ratio. So right side based on qualitative variable, which is from non-numerical form. Meanwhile, left side quantitative variable, numerical form. So here is a definition of each type of scale. So first look at nominal scale. So nominal scale based on categorical variable. So categorical variable here is, for example, gender. So gender, we have male, female. So that's why gender categorized as nominal scale. Another example, race. So race, Malay, Chinese, Indian. So that one is nominal scale. Okay, next, ordinal scale. So this one based on ranking. So ranking. For example, education level, rate of services, perception level. So any variable that be arranged in ranking, that one is ordinal scale. Okay, next proceed to interval scale. So interval scale compared to ratio scale. So this one, ratio scale starting point cannot be negative value. So always absolute or true 0 point. For example, body weight and income. So body weight can be negative? No. Can be 0? No. That's why body weight is a ratio scale. Income. Income for a worker. So income, when you work, for sure you have income. So cannot be negative value for a ratio scale. So for interval scale, so this one, the difference between data values are meaningful but cannot be manipulated with multiplication and division. For example, temperature. So temperature can be negative value? Yes. Negative 100 Celsius. So that one is interval scale. So this one, scales of measurement, nominal, ordinal, ratio, and interval. We proceed to source of data. First, primary data. So what is the primary data? Raw data or first-hand data means that the data are collected or obtained by the researcher himself. So why the researcher want to use primary data? So advantage by using primary data, more accurate, more reliable, and up to date. And of course, the primary data will satisfy the objective of the research. But when the researcher use the primary data, what happened to the cost? High cost, right? Time consuming and also required a lot of manpower. Meanwhile, second source of data, secondary data. So secondary data means that published data collected by other researchers. For example, we can obtain the secondary data from newspaper, internet, or economic report. So why we as a researcher prefer to use secondary data? For sure, required less time, less effort, and also less cost. And also, the secondary data may help the researcher to decide what further research needs to be done. Okay, compared to primary data, the disadvantage by using secondary data, the secondary data may not meet the specific needs or specific objective of the current research. And also, the secondary data may lack of the accuracy. So here, when you look at here, advantage of primary data become disadvantage of secondary data. Meanwhile, disadvantage of primary data becomes advantage of secondary data. How to design a questionnaire? So let's say you as a researcher, why you want to design a questionnaire? Why? So recall back, source of data. We have primary data and secondary data. So primary data, the researcher collect the data by himself. So that one is primary data. So why the researcher prefers to use primary data? Why? So recall back the advantage by using primary data. More accurate, right? So here, the researcher prefers to use primary data. Therefore, he needs to design a questionnaire. What is questionnaire? So questionnaire is a written instrument that contains a series of questions or items based on his research objective. So this one, some steps or guidelines for a researcher to design a good questionnaire. First, the researcher have to specify the information to be collected. So this one based on his research objective. Second, questionnaire should be as short as possible. Avoid long questions. Third, avoid questions that need calculation. Avoid questions on sensitive or personal issue. So this one, some steps or guidelines for a researcher to construct or to design a good questionnaire. Okay, after the researcher designed his questionnaire, how he want to collect the data? There are several methods of collecting data: direct interview, direct questionnaire, telephone interview, mail questionnaire, online survey, or direct observation. But the researcher must choose the method that provides most information at minimum cost. First, focus on direct interview. So this one, a trained interviewer gets the information from respondents depending on the objective of the survey and based on the questionnaire. So here, the interviewer interviews the respondents and record the response by himself. So this one also known as face-to-face interview or personal interview. Look at the advantage by using direct interview as data collection method. First, of course, obtain higher percentage of response. Second, interviewer can clarify any terms that are not understood by the respondent. Third, the interviewer can ask a lot of questions. And last one, the interviewer can detect whether the respondent is giving an accurate answer from their characteristics. Next, look at the disadvantage by using direct interview. First, of course, the cost is high. So this one based on interviewers' salary, traveling costs. Second, interviewer must be trained so that the data received is accurate. Next, the error may occur in recording response. And last one, of course, time consuming. So this one, direct interview. Second data collection method is direct questionnaire. So here, the researcher will greet the respondents and then he will explain briefly the intention of his study. After that, he will give the questionnaire to the respondent to fill up. And last one, the researcher will wait for the respondents to complete the questionnaire. So what is the advantage by using direct questionnaire? First, of course, the researcher will get high response rate. Next, the researcher can explain in detail the intention of his questionnaire so that the respondents may answer easily. So what happens if the researcher use direct questionnaire? Of course, expensive. The cost is high. And then the researcher might introduce bias by the way he explained the intention of his questionnaire. So this one, direct questionnaire. Next data collection method is telephone interview. So this one, the interviewer will contact a selected respondent by telephone. So it is possible to use telephone interview as a personal interview. It is conducted using telephone service line and respondents are asked to respond to the questions asked. So the limitation here is the selected respondents must have telephone, and then questions that will be asked to the selected respondents must be arranged properly. So this one, what is the advantage by using telephone interview? Of course, first, less expensive compared to personal interview or direct questionnaire. Second, selected samples that are widely dispersed can be contacted easily as long as they have a telephone. And what is the disadvantage by using telephone interview? Look at here. Only short questions are suitable to be asked. Long question? No. Short questions. Second, response rate is less compared to direct interview or direct questionnaire. So this one, telephone interview as data collection method. Next, we focus on mail questionnaire. So this one, the questionnaires are mailed to the selected respondents. A carefully constructed questionnaire will encourage participation by the respondents. Of course, it doesn't require interviewers. Okay. Then, after the respondents receive the questionnaire, the respondents required to fill up the questionnaire. After that, return back to the researcher within a specific time. So this one, look at the advantage by using mail questionnaire. First, convenience since wider region can be covered. Second, of course, lower cost compared to direct interview compared to direct questionnaire. And then the information received from the respondents is free from the biasness of the investigator. But what is the disadvantage by using mail questionnaire? First, the response rate is low. And then the respondents may not return the questionnaire within the specific time. And the respondents might not understand the question asked since no one can assist the respondent in answering the questionnaire. Therefore, what happened to the information obtained by the researcher? Maybe the information is less accurate. So this one, mail questionnaire. Online survey. Very famous, right? So this data collection method is very popular method to collect the data. Why? Okay, first, lower costs. Second, the research coverage is wider. Next, of course, the response rates are higher compared to mail questionnaire method. But what is the disadvantage by using online survey? Let's say you as a researcher, you have to keep reminded through emails or telephone for the respondents to answer the questionnaire. So this one, online survey. Finally, last data collection method that can be used by the researcher to collect the data is direct observation. Observe. From the word observe means the study used to study the habits or human behavior towards something or to study the characteristics of certain objects. So look at the advantage by using direct observation. So of course, fast to get the information needed. Then, the researcher or the observer may record what actually happened. And then, the disadvantage by using direct observation is the observer needs to be highly skilled and of course, unbiased. And then, disadvantage by using direct observation is if the respondents realize that they are being observed, they might not act like what they normally do. Therefore, the data is less accurate. So this one, direct observation. Just observe the samples. Now we proceed to introduction to sampling. So the word sampling is a process of selecting a sample from the population. Means that the researcher want to make a conclusion about the population of interest based on the selected sample. Then the sampling technique is a scientific method of selecting samples from the population. So, if the researcher selects sample from the whole population, he can reduce time, cost, and also the manpower. So, what is the terms in sampling? First one is probability sample, known as random sample. Means that every element in the population has known probability of being selected as sample, where sampling frame is needed. Second term is non-probability sample, known as non-random sample. Means that a sample that does not have the feature of probability sample where sampling frame is unavailable. Means that when you as a researcher, when you want to conduct a research but you don't have a sampling frame, so better you use non-probability sample as the best sampling technique. So third one is sampling frame. So the word frame means that a list. So a list of all the items in the population. So normally a list of IC number, a list of address, a list of full name means that a unique characteristics that represents all the samples or all the population's item. Next term is sampling units. means that the elements listed in the sampling frame. Sample survey design, process or procedure for selecting the sample. Next term is sampling error. So sampling error represents the error that arises because a sample cannot give complete or any information on a population of interest. And last one here is non-sampling error. Means that the error that arises because of incomplete or false information from selected samples. So this one types of sampling technique. There are two types of sampling technique as I mentioned earlier. Non-probability sampling, first one. And then second one is probability sampling. So for non-probability sampling, we have three sampling techniques to be covered. First one is convenience sampling. Second is judgmental sampling. And last one for non-probability sampling technique is quota sampling. Meanwhile, for probability sampling, we have simple random sampling, this one, and then systematic sampling, cluster sampling, stratified sampling, and number 5 is multistage sampling. We focus on non-probability sampling technique. First one is convenience sampling technique. So the sample units are only selected if they can be accessed easily and conveniently. The respondents are selected at the right time and in the right place. Therefore, less time consuming and also less expensive. For example, a researcher has decided to identify the students' perception towards facility provided by University A. Therefore, he may choose any students from the University A as sample. Next is judgmental sampling technique. So the sample will be selected based on the researcher's opinion, researcher's knowledge, researcher's judgment. So it's too subjective for judgmental sample. Therefore, good judgment will give a good result. For example, ABC company has decided to sample opinions of other companies regarding the economic forecast for next year. Then, the manager chose sample to be interviewed. So this one, the manager chose on its own. Therefore, totally based on his judgment. And last one, for non-probability sampling is quota sampling technique. The word quota means that it has specific figure, specific number. Therefore, the quotas number of people to be interviewed are chosen so that the sample is representative of the population. So the sample for quota sampling can be controlled for certain characteristics or based on certain guidelines. For example, survey regarding on the internet facility during online classes in University A. So the respondents divided into two categories, 65% diploma students and 35% degree students. So this one represents specific guidelines based on education level. So this one, three types of non-probability sampling. Let's focus on simple random sampling. The sample is selected from the homogeneous population, means that similar characteristics in such a way that each item has equal chance to be selected as sample. Means that, let's say population is 100, but the sample is only 10. So equal chance means that 10 over 100, 0.1, the probability value to be selected. Okay. Next, there are two methods of simple random sampling technique. First one is a lottery method. So lottery method known as lucky draw method. Second one is a random number method. So which method the researcher should be used based on the population size. So this one example how to implement or how to use the simple random sampling technique to select the sample. So the process here is get the complete sampling frame. Complete sampling frame from the population of interest and sort it. That's why you must have the sampling frame if you want to use the probability sampling technique. And then label each element with number. And last process is choose one by one sample without replacement by using lottery method or random number method. So to get these samples. So this one, no biasness, but required a lot of time. Why? Choose one by one sample. Next, systematic sampling technique. So a random starting point is selected and then every element of the homogeneous population is selected. So the systematic sampling technique is easier to implement compared to simple random sampling. So this one, 4 steps how the researcher want to use systematic sampling technique to select the sample from the population of interest. So for example, select 5 students out of 15. So 5 is a sample size, meanwhile 15 represents population size. So first step, calculate or find the uniform interval. So 15 divided by 5 equal to 3. So for the first 3, the researcher may choose the first sample randomly. Let's say third students becomes the first sample. Next plus 3. Next plus 3. Next plus 3. And then last one plus 3. So total sample is 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So 5 samples selected out of 15. So this one, systematic sampling technique, uniform interval. Next, stratified sampling technique. The population is divided into subgroups. We call it strata, and a sample is randomly selected from each strata. The population is divided into strata such that units within strata are homogeneous. Means that the characteristics is same. Meanwhile, between group, so between group are heterogeneous, means that the characteristics is differ. For example, select 50 students from each race. So Malay 100, Chinese 60, Indian 30, and then others is 10. The population size equal to 200. So how we want to select the sample using the stratified sampling technique. So first, recall back. What does it mean by homogeneous and heterogeneous? So homogeneous, look at here. Within group, Malay. So all 100 people, 100 units from the Malay group have the same race, Malay, but between group. So between group, characteristics of race is differ. So that's why the most suitable sampling technique to be used is stratified sampling technique. But how we want to calculate the sample size using stratified sampling technique? So look at here, you may use this formula to calculate the sample size for each group. For example, Malay race. The population size is 100. Divide the population size 200 times the sample size 50. So the sample size of Malay race equal to 25. Then the next step, how you want to select 25 out of 100 using simple random sampling technique or systematic sampling technique. So this one, stratified sampling technique. So this one, cluster sampling technique. The population is divided into subgroups where between groups are homogeneous and within groups are heterogeneous. So this one, the main difference between stratified sampling technique and cluster sampling technique. Okay, next step, how the researcher want to select the sample using cluster sampling technique. The researcher just select the group at random, and then all items from the selected group becomes a sample. So let's look at this example. So let's say there are 4 blocks A, B, C, D. The researcher want to use the cluster sampling technique. For example, he just chose only block B and C. Therefore, block A and D automatically out from the survey. And then what is the sample size? 60 plus 50. All the items from the selected group becomes sample. So the sample size equal to 110. Okay. And last one, the sampling technique of probability sampling is multistage sampling technique. So this one, the researcher selects a sample using more than one step of sample selection. So the objective of using this type of sampling technique is to reduce time, cost, and manpower when working with samples from very large population. So for example, an immunization survey of school children in a particular state. Okay, assume that the researcher selects a sample of 3 districts. From each of 3 selected districts, he selects 3 areas randomly. Then, from each of the selected areas, he selects only 4 schools. Finally, 50 school children will be selected randomly as samples from the selected schools. In total, 1,800 school children to be selected as sample, which illustrated like this. From district reduced to area and then reduced to school. So involve more than one step of sample selection. So this one, multi-stage sampling technique. Okay guys, that's all about the introduction to statistics. Assalamualaikum.